As Derek mentioned, my name's Alan Mueller. I've been with Eaton for not quite 2 decades, although it feels like it. I work out of our Cleveland office. It's a very nice place. It has all the things I love, including my family. And I'm a guy who deals with, what I describe to everyone is, if you look at the world of Eaton, there's the land, which is the business, and the water, which is IT, and I'm the guy who deals on the coastline where there's all the flooded houses and shipwrecks. So that's my life. I work with our data hubs, the product data hub, our trading partner hub, and for that reason, I was kind of the logical choice to go into MarkLogic and look at our next generation hub. So.
What's the motive like there?
Oh, that's just some fun I have. We'll talk about that later. But so Eaton at a glance. How many people here have heard of Eaton? All right, that's pretty good, actually. So we make a lot of things. We have 96,000 employees. We're a global company. We're a power management focused, diversified industrial, except for that some CEO got a wild hair and we bought a golf grips company. So we have that. Maybe that's power management through golf, I don't know. We've grown through acquisition. So since I've been at Eaton, we started at 5 billion and now we're at 20, 22 billion, depending on how things go. So we're a pretty big company. And you can see here that we make a lot of different things. We have aeronautical things, components. If you flew here in an airplane, it's more than likely that an Eaton hydraulic system was powering the control surfaces on your airplane, you know, the things that make you land safely and all that good stuff. So we have push buttons, we do UPS systems for data centers, transmissions for trucks. We have a large market in transmissions in the US and even in the world. Automobile valves, you name it, we're in it. So it's a big company, and the growth by acquisition is a main factor in the next part. So this is our BI landscape, not our regular landscape. This complex picture that you see is just the BI. So we've grown by acquisition, and Eaton is a very typical manufacturing firm. When we buy a company, small or large, we assess whether or not it makes sense to change out the ERP system and move it to a centralized ERP system or not. And most of the times, an ERP system is typically not a business differentiator, so we leave it. So we have lots of them. We have 200 plus. Now, actually, that's our VP's number. I think it's less than that, but we don't even know. We have so many. So we've got tons of ERP systems that we have to merge. We've got 19 large data warehouses that we're trying to retire. We used to have 3 IT organizations. Talk about fun. That was really fun. Try to get something happening on a corporate scale when you have 3 different IT groups to work with. We have many vertical solutions. You can see there's lots of lines here. Everything that we do in these areas, or did in these areas, was very, very vertical. So one business could probably figure out what it was doing, at least in one part of its business, but across the company, we really had no view of what was happening. So we spent a lot of time, and these are the questions we struggle with, right? Simple questions like, how will this hurricane that's coming affect our supply chain? What's going to happen? Are we in bad shape or not? We don't know. What's our exposure to commodity tax changes? This is very recent, right? We buy stuff, we play with it, and then we put it in another form and we sell it. So all those commodities that we buy, if they change the tax structure on those, you know, what's going to happen to us? Who do we focus our marketing on? We typically deal with distributors. We want to move to more end customer focus. So how do we do that? And we don't know quite yet. So questions like this, we struggle with. We need a centralized way, and that's what this slide is. We need to centralize our data, simplify it. We need to hide all this complexity, all these different ERP systems. And at the same time, we need to keep in place the ability to look at those vertical stacks of data. So if I'm the truck group that's over there, and I want to see my data applied with a conformed view of the entire corporation's data, we have to be able to support that. Otherwise, it's really a useless system for those different business groups. It's hard sell. So our first pass at solving this problem was a typical architecture. We sat down, we went through with consulting groups and our architecture specialists and all that, and we built out a stack here, and you can see it looks neat, right? And part of it is this thing in the middle. It's highlighted in pink. It was our integration data hub. We called it the conceptual ERP. And basically that was, what would Eaton look like if we had one ERP system? And can we build something that does that? And we farmed out the idea, and we got support from various groups and businesses and through the IT leadership, and decided to build that. And we started off with our standard technologies that we had in-house, because why not? They've been working all these years. They should work now, right? So we started off with ETL and a relational database. We hired guys, and we had people working on creating third normal database data models, right? And we started with one subject area, sales and orders. And we set off down the road, and what happened was it didn't work really well. It was very difficult to design. It was inflexible. We couldn't change it, right? And it was very costly in term of time, resources, and I would say missed opportunities, right? So you can see here we've got some statements here about how long it took, and we really couldn't realize our benefits. And we still stand by the fact that our idea is good. We were just going about it the wrong way. Right? And here's some call outs that just kind of tell you more of the details of where we had problems, right? So when we had to make a change to our model, right, we had to go change all the business and logic in the ETL. And this is probably almost the same as what Gary Bloom was talking about earlier. But figuring out where those changes in the data were made was almost impossible, because we had different groups doing different things in ETL. Looking at the localized data, that was totally gone. When we built that conformed model, it couldn't hold all the local data that we needed. So our business consumers were disappointed in the fact that all of a sudden their special fields that came from their ERP system that helped them run their business, that were very important for them, were gone. So they weren't real happy. The data model was what I'd call brittle. So if we needed to really change the data model, it was hard to do. And then we started affecting, when we changed the data model in the middle, we started affecting the consumers. And now we have to synchronize all the consumers and make sure that they are ready for the changes when we want to make them. So all this resulted in a situation where we were just not able to deliver. It took us 2+years to get sales and orders into a form where it was working, and then the first people that saw it said, hey, we want this, and it wasn't there, and we had to go back and change it. Right? So we stepped back from this, and we had some help from friends. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot this slide. This is kind of how things pan out when you do a project with the ETL and RD in a relational database, right? So, and everyone's probably familiar with that if you've been in the BI space for a while. Right? You're going to do your requirements, you're going to create your model, you're going to do your ETL, you work on your consuming applications, right? The data model is very inflexible, and this forces you into a situation where if you're dealing with 100 sources, like our sales and right, our sales model was working with, if you're dealing with 100 sources, your designers are going to do one or two things. They're going to try and get the complete model, which means they're going to try and get all the requirements up front, because they know if they have to change it, it's going to be really hard. So it draws out your requirements, and everything becomes what I call very cautious. And so you work in this cautious mode because no one wants to miss out on a requirement that's going to make you redo your model later. So that slows things down. Or you do the second thing, which is you say, okay, I'm not going to have everything in there. I'm going to go move more quickly and deploy, but I know I'm going to have to make changes later. The problem is when you're working with your ETL and your model and then your consumers, the minute you start making changes, it gets very expensive because now you've got to go to this box down here at the bottom and you have to work through syncing up your consumers to make sure that they're releasing at the same time. It becomes very difficult and very slow and very drawn out. Right. Okay, so now here's the slide. So we step back from that. The word SERP kind of got a bad name at Eaton. It was like something you didn't associate it with because everyone would laugh at it because it took so long and it really wasn't doing anything that anybody wanted. So we stopped working on that. We met MarkLogic, our VP of BI, Tom Black, met with some MarkLogic folks. He saw a demonstration of the healthcare.gov, site. We kind of walked through different scenarios with MarkLogic, and we decided this is something we'd like to try out. And we're very cautious at Eaton. We're not a leading edge company. We're a later adopter of new technologies. So we proceed very cautiously with these new things. So we went to a POC. And the POC was very simple. It was myself and a solution designer. We went with a simple architecture. We didn't build a whole lot of infrastructure to do things. We just wanted to prove out the central piece, which was, could MarkLogic do what we needed it to do? We measured it against our previous project. Fortunately, we had really good information or data about how that SERP executed and how things went. So we used those as our metrics. We were limited to 2 months. And we decided we want to do this internally because we see if we can figure this stuff out. We'd played with other NoSQL databases and we'd learned that the complexity of bringing in a new technology was something you couldn't ignore. So we wanted to do this. We did have a lot of help from MarkLogic. Dave Sudkamp and his team were there every time we needed any assistance, so that was very great. But like I said, we tried to do it ourselves and figure things out. And the results, well, were this. So we took our Eaton hydraulics and aerospace data for invoices, right? We factor in a number of ERP variants. We considered the requirements gathering as the same in both cases, and pretty much it would be. So we factored that out, right? And then we took the time we spent on the proof of concept for MarkLogic and we added 50%. So we kind of put our finger on the scale against MarkLogic because we figured, okay, we're new, we're just 2 people, and you factor in the formality of processes and things like that would take place at Eaton once you took this and made it military grade, right? So even after we did that, we came up with a 4.2 to 1 acceleration using MarkLogic. That's huge. That caught a lot of attention because now instead of 2 years, you're talking 6 months. And quite frankly, I think, and I'll show you how MarkLogic affects a project. If we did things on a greater scale, we'd probably drive that number way higher. And that's our intention, or that's what we expect. Okay, so some technical advantages of MarkLogic. If you're here, you may or may not be familiar with them. The deployment simplicity, I mean, it's almost like a joke. You just install it and it's ready, okay? Compared to Oracle, where you have guys working for weeks and getting things all tuned up. The clustered architecture, we really like that because we are tired of buying massive servers. We want to go to something we can scale incrementally, horizontally with smaller commodity servers. We also like, we're not using yet a whole lot, but the semantics and the search. We do use the APIs. We're gearing up and getting ready to use semantics, and the search stuff is going to come soon, right? Which we're just learning and growing right now. Okay, but here are the benefits, right? So the extract and load model that we're using. So we're not doing any transforms in the middle anymore. It's all happening in MarkLogic. So we totally followed the MarkLogic Data Hub pattern. We just pull data out of tables and put it into MarkLogic, and then we keep track of it as we go through. So that makes things a lot simpler. The flexible data model, I'll just look here. Right, so the flexible data model is huge for us. So I can go through, and we did this in our pilot, and then in subsequent efforts we've done this. I did a financial database. I added AP data from two of our finance systems. We have 4 that we work with. From 2 of those finance systems in a week, and was able to get data out to a consumer in envelope form in its very simplest in that time span, probably 2 weeks, right? Because I had to play with it a little. So you can do that, but then you can come back later and add more complicated data as you learn. So as you figure out the requirements, you add more into your data model. So you can build out your XML. And it doesn't break the XML that you have in place already. So that's huge for us, because I can go through and grab stuff based on a requirement, and I think Gary Bloom was talking about that today. Work from the requirements first and work backwards. So I can go through and grab stuff. This happened to be for our tax group, so they have a particular interest in financial data. It's different from the rest. Grab that data, put it into the model, then come back later when I deal with some of the folks that deal with exports or other things, right, and add more data in, and not break anything. So I don't touch the consumers as I'm working through this process. And I can do this iteratively too. Okay. Also, the envelope pattern that MarkLogic espouses, we bought into that. We really love that because it also holds the local data. So as I build my envelope with my conformed data, I also keep all the local data from the ERP system that we used to build it. So when I run a query, now I can run a query on this conformed data. I can also query, in that same query, have statements that deal with, that hydraulics ERP system with its very special field that they care about a lot. And I don't have to try and push that into my conformed model at all. So that's huge for us because we have a lot of those situations. All right, let's see. Here we go. So project-wise, this is where MarkLogic excelled for us. And it's really about a technology that enables you to change the way you work. I mean, in and of itself, MarkLogic is very good, but it basically changes how you can work. And that's really good for us. So the flexible data model and the fact that we can even do data model versioning allows us to work in an agile fashion. So we can actually start, the minute we start requirements, we can start pulling data into MarkLogic, right? We can start the modeling, right? And build out, and we worked in layers, so we would grab the simple data first, and as the requirements were developing over time, we would build what I'll call the medium complexity data and put that into the model, and then we'd go back, and as the requirements were being finalized, and we were starting to get the harder things, the things that required calculations or more data from different tables, things like that, we would factor that into the model. So we could work in an agile fashion, but we were able to release data very quickly, even before the requirements were complete. And that was usable data that people could get at. So that's really big for us. Because now instead of waiting 2 years and a huge requirement cycle that has to be done, we can put stuff out almost within weeks or months. Okay. So that's kind of where we are. We went from our proof of concept and what we learned from the proof of concept, and we then went to a pilot. So in the pilot, we set up our infrastructure. We got the servers, we set up our development environment, our QA, our prod. We worked on high availability and disaster recovery, things like that, right? We have Nitin Joshi here, who's worked with us on that from TCS. He's been a great help. Process docs, working with our database administrators and getting them up to speed with MarkLogic, that whole thing. We've been working on the platform, right? So MarkLogic itself, let's get MarkLogic in, let's learn the different tools, ML Gradle, how are we going to use these things and plug them into our source code control system. In our case, we use ClearCase. Has its pluses and minuses. So building all that out, right? And then also building out an actual solution. So this was actually kind of a low ball. It was one ERP system. It really wasn't a test of MarkLogic's capability. It was more about us just delivering something that worked. We had to retire a reporting system, an inventory system, so we used MarkLogic for that. So this we just delivered. And again, because it was a pilot and we were just setting everything up, we didn't expect this to really show any business gains or anything like that. But it was a success, and we did well, right? I think the major issues we've had have been with the reporting side. We're actually pushing data into a reporting tool, Oracle's OBIEE, out of this data hub. So most of the issues we've had have been with that, or with inaccurate queries that were in place before we even started, and having to figure out go through a lot of logic that was there and actually wasn't right. So yeah, that part's been fun. So what's next for Eaton? We're going to build a program. We've got a program manager in place. I'll be working as a technical lead on that group, and we're going to address finance data, manufacturing data, and supply chain data. We've got a lot of things to focus on in building out a team. We've got to bring in, we've got to staff up for MarkLogic. That's not so easy. The gentleman before me from Sony mentioned that Java programmers seem to do better. It's basically, we've learned that higher level programmers, and not that PL SQL is a lower level language, but the higher skilled programmers do well. They're used to dealing with abstractions that XQuery and XML and MarkLogic have in place, so they work really well with this. Other programmers tend to struggle a little. You got to give them a little more time, right? The organizational change management. When we first started off on our first project with the finance data, every project review that we had has a list of risks, and every time the word MarkLogic appeared, it was red. That was a high risk in our organization's mind. And it's funny because if you went through the progression of meetings that we had where we assessed our risks, we have a gated project process, right? So, you go through gates and all that good stuff. The next gate, the red started to disappear. The next gate, it disappeared a little more. And by the end of it, MarkLogic wasn't even a risk. Our biggest risks were ourselves. So that was big. It's recognized now within Eaton as being a surefire solution. It has never not done something that we've asked it to do. And if we've had problems with MarkLogic, it's really been because we don't know about something, some way of tuning it, or some way, or some tool that we just are ignorant of. So it's done really well for us. We also struggle with Agile. So this is like I mentioned, we have a gated process for delivering projects, and that is like, I'm sure somewhere at Eaton there's a process for going to lunch. I mean, quite frankly, I almost guarantee it. I just haven't found it yet. But so getting us out of that mindset and taking people and devoting them to a project full time is a huge problem we struggle with. And that's not a MarkLogic problem, but the problem is if you're going to really take advantage of what MarkLogic can do, you should be working in an agile fashion. Because why else would you have a flexible data model and be able to work iteratively and then not do it? So that's been tough for us, is just getting that mindset where you're going to put people on a project, they're not going to have 5 projects going on at once, they're going to focus on it. That's been tough for us, right? So, and really that's it. In summary, I mean, for Eaton, we absolutely need this data hub. We can't answer the questions that we need in a very dynamic world. We need to answer these questions. And having all our data in one hub in a conformed fashion is very important. MarkLogic is the tool for us. Our traditional tools just didn't work. And it's not that they're bad, they're just not made for what we're trying to do. I mean, Oracle's a good database. I mean, it works, right? But it just doesn't do what we need to do. We looked at other NoSQL databases. We looked at MongoDB. We looked at some of the other things out there. They don't have the suite of tools that comes with MarkLogic, that accompanies MarkLogic, that lets you do these things. You're going to have to pretty much build all those APIs and all the internal data manipulation tools if you use MongoDB or something like that. So, that was one of the benefits of MarkLogic. The flexibility of the data model is huge. I can go in, I can add something, I can take something away. XQuery is really great. If you take something away, it doesn't find a null and blow up. It just says, oh, nothing's there, and it keeps going, right? So that's really good. The combination of XQuery and the flexible data model is huge for us. It's well suited for for an agile methodology. I talked about that a little. And again, the canonical and local data support is very big for us, because otherwise we couldn't get a business to buy into this. And that's it. So that's an appetizer for lunch. Anyone have any questions? No questions? So if you do have questions, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was curious on the reporting connection into MarkLogic. What type of tools do you use on the reporting side, and how was your connection technique?
Okay, so the question is, what were the reporting tools that we used and all that? That's a good question. We're proceeding fairly cautiously with that. So what we're doing is building our hub, and we're making extracts and pushing them into our legacy reporting tools. So we have OBIEE, and that's also how we're dealing with security for right now. So OBIEE has its user security model. We push that over, and we leverage that. So that's how users are controlled to our hub right now. So we expect to, as we grow our expertise, directly hit MarkLogic. We just haven't gotten there yet. So, any other questions? Cool. Well, thank you for coming. I know I'm right between you and lunch, so thanks.